November 3rd, 2017. Apple introduces iPhone 10, the first iPhone with a completely different screen than its predecessors, with OLED technology, brighter, with much better contrast, and a screen-to-body ratio of 82.9%. Since then, this has been the technology that has endured in iPhones, and is being continued in most phones on the market. Unfortunately, since nothing lasts forever, many of us have had to replace the screen because it fell or broke in some way. But with that aside, let's talk about the best screen on the market. In this video, we will show you the detailed differences between the 5 main types of screens. Based on comparative testing, the pros and cons of each will become clear, and why it's important for you to know this when buying or selling a screen for any device. For this video, the iPhone 10 screen will serve as an example, but the information applies to all models. Oled Soft. Like the original screens, which are also OLED technology, they have a light-emitting diode for each pixel. This illuminates each pixel separately, giving this type of screen great brightness and contrast. The Oled Soft uses a plastic substrate that makes the screen flexible and able to withstand more bending, avoiding the risk of breakage during the installation process, and enabling it to handle harder impacts. Oled Hard. This screen uses a glass substrate, making it more fragile to handle in installation and drops. It's usually cheaper than the Oled Soft, and there is less chance of screen burn-ins. InCell. The InCell technology unites 2 elements into one, which will make your device more stable. The digitalizer, also known as the touch function, is incorporated in the LCD screen. These displays also have a very good price to quality ratio. Refurbished. Refurbished screens are used screens that contain all their original components as they were taken out from an original phone, with the exception of the front glass or the flex cable that may have been changed depending on the need. This display is premium, and so that's reflected in the price, and it's a little higher. Takeout. This type of screen is completely original. It's extracted from a phone that probably didn't work, but the screen was in perfect condition. Since it's the same as the one to be replaced, its price is the highest of all. This takeout, or original screen, is the one that we're going to use as a reference point in the comparisons. The closer we can get to this, the better the display will be. We're classifying the tests in 2 sections. First, visuals. We'll describe the visual differences of all the screens. Second, impact. In this section, we'll show the effect that the screens have on the use and the performance of the device. Let's start with the color. Oled Soft. Colors are warmer, although looking from an extremely tight angle may have an impact on the colors. They're very similar to the original, but a demanding user would notice the warmer colors relatively easily. Oled Hard. The color expression of this screen is quite good, but can sometimes be more saturated. It's also practically the opposite of the Oled Soft, as the colors are colder. InCell. The colors can sometimes be a bit softer. Refurbished. It's quite similar to the original. However, if the front glass has been changed, you will notice a difference in the whites, which end up being a little bit warmer. Touch speed. The original screen of all iPhones, except the iPhone 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max, have a 60 Hz refresh rate. That's the speed with which the content of a screen is updated. Now, on the other hand, from the iPhone 10 onwards, they have a 120 Hz sample rate. This means that the screen is checking 120 times per second if we have our finger on it and where our finger is. It's important to be clear about this because one thing is what the phone shows, which is the content at 60 Hz, and the other is what the phone receives, which is the location of our finger at 120 Hz. Oled Soft. It's slightly slower than the original. Oled Hard. This has a little lag, but probably not something a customer would notice without a direct comparison. InCell. As in the case of Oled Soft, it has an almost indistinguishable delay from the original screen. Refurbished. The delay is slightly noticeable. Brightness. The original brightness of the iPhone 10 is 634 nits. Technically speaking, 1 nit is equal to 1 candela per square meter, and it measures the light intensity of an object. The more nits there are, the brighter the screen intensity will be. Oled Soft. In this aspect, the Oled Soft turns out to be quite similar to the original. In addition, it's superior to the Hard and its brightness is more uniform regardless of the angle from which it's viewed. Oled Hard. When viewed strictly from the front, its difference from the original might not be very noticeable, but when you look at it from the sides, it can be quite opaque compared to the original and even compared to the Soft. InCell. The backlight panel does a really good job in providing brightness, almost matching the original, but it's only when you're head-on and indoors. If not, you may not be able to see your content very well. Refurbished. The screen is original, of course, so it's the most similar, but when changing the front glass, the brightness can be a little less uniform and somewhat duller. Impact. In this section, you'll see the effect that temperature, thickness, weight, and consumption have on the daily use of a phone. Let's start with the weight. The weight of an iPhone X is 174 grams. The weight of the original screen is 40 grams. This is the weight of all the screens in question without the Face ID flex. Oled Soft weighs 39.6 grams. Oled Hard comes in at 45.5 grams. InCell 45.9 grams. And Refurbished 41.2 grams. So why is weight important? Well, like we said a moment ago, the original screen weighs 40 grams. So the screen represents 23% of the total weight of the phone. You would think that when changing the screen for a refurbished one, we wouldn't notice the change. However, because we've got to know our phone so well, we may notice the 5.5 gram difference. That's 11% more than the original and the Oled Hard. Of course, this is something minimal, and in a matter of minutes, our hand gets used to it. Thickness. The thickness of the original screen is 1.8 millimeters. Oled Soft, 1.8 millimeters. Oled Hard, 2 millimeters. InCell, 2.4 millimeters. And Refurbished, 1.9 millimeters. Now, we're not going to notice a 0.2 millimeter difference. However, with the naked eye, we can see the 0.6 millimeter extra that InCell has. Again, it's a really minor complaint, but if you do feel that the phone is bulkier in your hand, you'll know why. The temperature of the original screen can vary from 34 degrees Celsius at the beginning up to 40 degrees Celsius after 30 minutes without turning the phone off. All measurements were made indoors at an ambient temperature of approximately 27 degrees Celsius. Oled Soft, 36 degrees Celsius and 42 degrees Celsius. Oled Hard, 35 degrees Celsius and 41 degrees Celsius. InCell, 41 degrees Celsius and 44 degrees Celsius. Refurbished, 35 degrees Celsius and 41 degrees Celsius. Should we care about the screen temperature on a phone? Yes. While it's true that the impact will never be direct, in the long run, it is likely that a higher temperature will influence some of the components. For example, the battery will have a shorter life. So it's especially important if you want to keep your phone in top condition for as long as possible. Consumption. Is this really important? Without a doubt. Why? The consumption of each screen has a direct impact on the battery life. In fact, the screen is by far the component that consumes the most battery power in a device. With the takeout screen and maximum brightness, the phone consumes 300 milliamps without using the touch, 500 milliamps by using touch, and 550 milliamps by performing a little action on the screen. So how much difference is there between the screens? Well, let's summarize the consumption of all the screens with the maximum brightness and performing a small action on the screen, which is what we normally do in our day-to-day use of the phone. Takeout, 550 milliamps. Oled Soft, 650 milliamps. Oled Hard, 700 milliamps. Refurbished, 500 milliamps. And the InCell comes in at 800 milliamps. The one that consumes the most by far is InCell. In fact, it consumes 45% more than the original screen. So, if before your battery lasted around 10 hours of continuous use, with an InCell screen, it may last you only about 5.5 hours. Of course, all of this data is approximate, and it depends on the state of the battery and the amount of use that we give our phone every day. What is clear is that the screen that we put on our device has a direct impact on its performance. When choosing a screen, it's really important that you take into account the impact it's going to have on the use of the phone. We really don't want to tell you to buy a specific screen. As a technician, you've got to help your customer to be fully enabled to make a decision that seems best for them. So, before choosing, We encourage you to explain all of the factors that we've detailed in this video.